All right. Good morning, Doug. We're back with viewer Q&A, but there's a few things it seems like we got to talk about first. In particular, Biden's speech last night to the country about the threats to democracy.
Too much of what's happening in our country today is not normal. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
What's your take on that?
I actually couldn't believe that speech as I heard it. It was so over the top. It was so full of vitriol and hate. It was like an inducement to civil war. It was like he's telling half of the country, you're going to be the new kulaks and you're in a lot of trouble and we're going to do bad things to you. I mean, I don't know who put him up to it. I mean, these horrible people that he's got in back of him did, obviously, but I thought that speech was like ringing the bell to the start of the fight.
Is there any historical comparison you can make to that? Is there anything that you're aware of that is that kind of a laying down the gauntlet, kind of crossing the Rubicon sort of speech that he made?
Yeah, well, Kristallnacht in Germany, what was that, 1938, I think? That wasn't a speech, though. That was an action out there. But what other speech has there been where a leader of a country has actually thrown down the gauntlet saying, we hate you and we want to fight you? That's really what he was saying. I mean, if a Republican had said anything like that, all of the media would be saying hate speech, well, which it was. And of course, I'm not opposed to hate speech because I like to know what's on people's minds, but it's different when the leader of a country says something like that, as opposed to just some guy ranting and raving on a street corner.
Well, what did you, even the visuals, like the blood red background behind him? I mean, it reminded me of that, was it Chancellor Sutler from V for Vendetta? It had that vibe to it.
Yeah, red is a country that excites the emotions, quite frankly. And considering that red is the color of the Republicans for some reason. Yeah, it was emotional. And listen, the other thing is why did Biden pick Philadelphia as a place? It was where the Constitution was formulated and debated, which he remarked on in his speech. It's like it was the start of a new era. That was really
a reset, if you will.
A reset, exactly correct. So I think this was intentional. It wasn't just a speech from the Oval Office. People have seen lots of those, but this was in a place that resonates to Americans. God, I hope it's not as serious as I think it is going to turn out being. I don't know what they've got in store now to follow up on that. It was a challenge. It was a challenge to essentially 70 million adult Americans that voted.
Right. It's very strange. And I think, there were a couple of things that were that people have talked about, I guess, that it was kind of crossing a line. And I think that it in and of itself crossed the line. It just, so it doesn't even, you don't even have to add anything else to it. But, there's some tradition that you don't use the military and anything political. That when it's there's some sort of, I guess, line between when it's a political speech, when it's a policy speech. And the talking heads, anyway, were saying that because of the way that this was done, this was a policy speech. This wasn't a political speech. It's a policy speech, which means it's effectively the policy of, the Defense Department and the NSA and the CIA and the FBI. And it's not just him, it's the official executive branch saying this. So there's that. And one key that was it is that having the Marines in the background, you don't.
I was just going to remark on that. That's unusual. I don't recall that being done in the past, having those two Marines back there.
No, and the blood red background, I think, is so shocking because I mean, as soon as I saw that, as soon as it came on, I'm sitting there with Jane. I'm like, what the hell? Like, why? They're clearly sending a message,
And these things aren't accidental. They are choreographed. They're thought out by people that are professionals at mob manipulation. So I haven't heard much comment so far, or I haven't heard if they've taken any action here the day after. But we've got And, I'm wondering what the effect of that speech on the elections in November are going to be, positive or negative.
I told you my hypothesis when they had the raid on Trump's place in Mar-a-Lago was that they're trying to bait MAGA or Trump supporters into basically abandoning the hope of any political solution to stuff, and so misbehaving essentially. That would then give them the cause they needed to do whatever they wanted. And this was what it feels like. It's basically saying, if you, the message I got from it, of course, I don't vote, so this doesn't affect me, but I mean, if you vote and you deny the election results, then you are a public enemy, which basically means to me, if let's assume that the MAGA people feel like the election was rigged, I think have confidence then that it would probably be the case again, and that if they complain about it, they're the enemy.
Yes. And that speech, in my mind, and it's setting everything about it, was all about intimidation, kind of telling people the way it's going to be. And so my guess is that people that are anti-Biden are going to kind of go into hiding at this point. This is really serious, really serious. I hope it was just a psychotic break on the part of Biden and his handlers, but I don't think so. This was planned out.
Well, and he's been working his way up to it. A couple days before, he referred to from the right after the January 6th, when he came out that same day and called it an insurrection. I was like, that's it. That choice of words is escalates. It's trying to define your political opponents as domestic terrorists. So like that was intentional. That lays the groundwork for where we are today, I think. And earlier this week, he was referring to MAGA as what do you say, pseudo-fascist, I think was the word he used.
Yes, I would not doubt at this point that there is going to be a Reichstag fire. I mean,
false flag, right?
Yeah, these things actually happen where when the timing is right, something happens and you blame it on, the people you designate as the bad guys.
Actually, I was watching it live on a stream on YouTube, and about halfway through the speech, the feed died. And I thought, oh God, someone actually, they're faking an assassination attempt. And then I flipped over to it and it was working. It was still working. It was just that one that went down. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe it. But that kind of thing you could anticipate will happen. False flag type stuff. It does seem that way. And if nothing else, they're preparing the groundwork for non-personing, half the country. That's clearly there.
Yeah. The late 60s and the early 70s were very turbulent. But we're looking at much, much more turbulent times combined with a much, much weaker economy, and the financial system is on the ragged edge in addition. Anyway, I guess to be continued. All we can watch at this point.
That's yes. And I tell you, I felt very good about the fact that I'm already back in Uruguay, because watching it there online from so far away, made me feel a lot better about the whole thing. Honestly, I think distance between people, and of course, I'm not a MAGA. I'm not part of that, but it doesn't even matter. Like if you disagree, then you are seemingly a political enemy of some kind.
Yeah. It just shows that we're just part of history, and this stuff has gone on many, many hundreds of times throughout history, and it's happening again. When it happens, it's inconvenient and unpleasant, but there's nothing you can do about it. And like I've said before, hey, it'll be pretty bad, but unlikely to be as bad as Berlin in 1945. So look at the bright side, as I always do.
You always are so good at it. But I have to say, it does feel like, if anything, with all of the, our Doomcast here we've been doing for, I don't know, is it going on 2 years now? It's getting close to that, I think. We might have underestimated the problems that are coming.
That's right. Because, years ago, when people asked me, well, how bad is this Greater Depression going to be? And I always answered, I thought it was a funny quip. It's going to be worse than even I think it's going to be. And by God,
you're right.
I've been right.
Well, at least one of your predictions for sure is coming true.
Yeah, that's right. It's so gratifying when your predictions come true.
There's some victory in that, I guess. So
yeah, there is. I mean, okay. One of the most important things for everybody. Everybody likes to be right, or at least believe that they were right. I mean, sure,
it's important.
It is. It's all just dust in the wind, but still, we like to pretend it's important.
Exactly. Yeah, we do. So we got some good questions for today. I guess we can go ahead and jump into those. Surprisingly, there were very few questions about this topic, which makes me wonder what the people who watch this podcast are thinking about if this didn't even make it.
Yeah, afraid to ask the questions. Well, I don't know, but we covered the topic, so let's see what else is on people's minds.
Well, one of our viewers asked if you had a comment on the Kirchner assassination attempt. Did you see that on video yet?
Yeah, I just saw that, and I halted it, framed it to see what the gun was. It looked like a small, like a 380 size automatic, but I couldn't tell. Could you identify the gun?
They said it's and I've never heard of this brand, a Bursa 380. I looked that up, and I don't know. Someone told me they were made in Argentina. I don't know if that's true, but I looked up the website and it was in English. And the Bursa logo says, well, their tagline is "You can trust." Apparently not.
Yeah, look, if you're going to do something like that, don't use some cheap off-brand piece of junk that you probably haven't even tested before. Look, Christina's a horrible, horrible person. But would it have been good if she was assassinated? And no, because it would have been an excuse for the bad guys that are in power around her in Argentina to lock things down and maybe put her absolutely horrible son. We're talking about somebody, Maximo. I call him Minimo, but his actual name is Maximo. It'll put him in the limelight and make him into a hero. Oh, your mother died for the revolution. They'll fabricate all this stuff. So actually, I'm glad it didn't work. And they say this guy was a Nazi. I'm unaware of any Nazis. I mean, there's a few oddballs here and there, but where are all these Nazis I hear about?
Yeah. It's interesting. They've been coming up quite a bit lately, at least with Ukraine. And I think that the thing is he had a tattoo on his elbow. I think they call it the Black Sun, which is apparently associated with Nazis. And I think that one of the shooters in earlier this year, one of the young guys who went into that black grocery store and shot that up, he had that logo on his body armor, actually. And then, if I remember right, and then also, they showed some of the guys in the Azov battalion in Ukraine had that same Black Sun.
I'm chagrined to say that I am not, as the French say, bon vivant. I guess I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't know who the Black Sun is. I wouldn't know how to find them, or other than a tattoo, I wouldn't know how to identify them. But, Nazis. Was this guy anti-Semitic? Because she's not a Jew. I mean, is that part of it? I mean, National Socialists, that's what Nazis are. I mean, what are his beliefs? Probably not that different from Christina's. I mean, not that different at all. So, this is name calling.
I'm trying to find a picture of this tattoo to share with you so you can see it. 1 second. Let me bring it up here. It's interesting. You just see it on his elbow here.
I've never seen one of those before.
I'd never even heard of it until recently with what's happening in Ukraine. So people were wearing it as a patch. So I did see it there, but yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, well, everybody you don't like today is a Nazi or a fascist. And none of these people are able to define and tell you, well, exactly what is a Nazi and what do they believe? And exactly what is a fascist and what does he believe? It's crazy name calling.
Yeah, that's the logo, apparently.
I see. It's kind of vaguely reminiscent of some elements of a swastika.
Yeah.
These people just love to have symbols to identify themselves, as do socialists generally. And everybody wants to be part of a group. This is what Matthias Desnet is talking about in his book on authoritarianism, picking up where Hannah Arendt left off, where people feel serious floating anxiety. They're cut off from their families. They're cut off from any kind of culture, and they're looking for something to belong to, anything. So
I'm always been suspicious of joiners myself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I like to investigate everything and see what's going on in these people's hands. But joining a group, no. The last group that I joined was the Boy Scouts, and even that made me vaguely uncomfortable towards the end of my tenure as a Boy Scout.
Yeah, you start to question the obedience principle, right?
Yeah, exactly. In fact, out of the 12 Boy Scout virtues, which I can still reel off, I always had a problem with the obedience part.
That's a tough pill to swallow sometimes. Yep.
It is. That's the part that when we would say them, I'd kind of mumble.
Yeah. Okay. Next question, Doug. What do you think about uranium and the Japanese nuclear restarts, supply and demand balance, and et cetera? And there's a related question: is that have you ever seen a time where the uranium thesis had this much upside?
Yeah, well, I've written about this, and the first uranium boom was during the 50s when, as a little kid, I remember on the I Love Lucy show with Lucille Ball, her husband, Ricky, decided to become a uranium prospector. So that was the first uranium boom in the US. And the last one, of course, was about the year 2000 when uranium, it got as low as like $10 a pound for yellow cake. It cost at that time $20 to $30 to mine it. And then it ran up to 140, 150, something in that area. And the number of uranium companies in the world went from like 4 or 5 or 6 to roughly 400 companies that had uranium in their name were concentrating on looking for uranium. So now uranium at the moment is about $50 a pound. And the marginal cost of mining uranium, and it varies. These things vary depending on all kinds of factors, I guess we could discuss, but it's below production costs for most. And most mines are mothballed because it's marginal at best. Answer to the question: Japanese starting up their nuclear power plants again? Yeah. And the Chinese and Indians will be building more. And as stupid as European and destructive as European politicians are, things could get so serious in Europe this winter, they may actually have to back down and say, yep, we have to go to nuclear power because we don't want to use gas, don't want to use coal, can't use oil. So what are you going to do? You're going to burn wood and windmills for an industrial society? No. So it's going to go back to nuclear. Good news. Bad news is that with one thing or another, including all the NGOs that'll fight against it, and not in my backyard people, and God knows what, it could be years and years from when you design the plant to when you start building it and put it online. So that said, but it's easier in the third world. I'm really bullish on uranium. Yeah, really bullish.
I guess California, in a fit of at least temporary sanity, decided to keep Diablo Canyon active, which they're planning to mothball later this year.
You know, that can all change. And I wouldn't doubt that some green warrior is planning some kind of a terrorist event at that plant or something else, just to throw a monkey wrench in the gears.
It would just so confuse the narrative that it's white supremacist, nationalist, Nazi terrorists that are the problem. If we had some echo warrior terrorists, though.
Yeah, and should they be black? And when are the Hispanics going to get involved in this too? I mean, you'd think they were too commonsensical, but then you look at Hispanics in South America. No, they're not commonsensical at all. So it's kind of a witch's brew.
Exactly. Yep.
I'm still bullish on uranium and uranium stocks.
Okay, good. Doug, can you elaborate on why you don't think that Central America is a good place to live, at least for you?
Well, the land of the Frito Bandito. So let's look at the countries in Central America. And maybe you should divide Mexico into zones. You know, parts of Mexico are really what you might call Indian country. I guess that's politically incorrect to say. But you know, in the environment we're facing today, the American Indians, who in some ways have gotten a really bad shake, are becoming very nationalistic and don't like the European conquerors. That was 500 years ago. That's especially true in southern Mexico, I think. But let's go south. Guatemala, Indian country. It's dangerous being a person of European descent in a lot of Guatemala. Honduras, backward, primitive country, same thing. Nicaragua, still run by, who's that goofball that was buying the expensive sunglasses way back when? Ortega? No, who the hell's running Nicaragua?
Yeah, it's Ortega. It's Ortega.
Right, Daniel Ortega. Right. Well, look, I was a founding partner in a beachside resort with Bill Bonner and a few other guys.
Called
and
Rancho.
that's worked out pretty. Yeah, Rancho Santana, and it's worked out.
Nice place.
Nice place. And they leave you alone. They don't bother you. It's not dangerous. It's just a political scam. But okay, Nicaragua. So what are we missing? El Salvador. Way too many people. For some reason, it's full of nasty gangs. not someplace you really want to go. Costa Rica, always been a nice place, especially during the 70s and 80s. There was a boom on Costa Rica as the place where you ought to move if you're a gringo. And I've been down there many times, nice place. But at this point, it's expensive, completely overrun by gringos from the US and Canada. I don't know. It's still a nice place, I guess, and pretty safe. But next is Panama. And I like Panama because Panama City is advanced, cosmopolitan, international. It's got some nice areas on the beach and in the jungle. I don't know. I'm not even sure I'd consider Panama part of the rest of Central America. Anyway, it's kind of a backwater. Always has been. Probably always will be. Nothing against it. Hey, if you like it, it's great.
Yeah, I think you're right. Panama is fundamentally different than the rest of those. But Panama, and I used to be I used to like Panama, but the way they handled the COVID stuff was extreme.
Yeah.
I had some friends that were there, and they actually claimed medical evacuation and got a private plane to leave because they were only even allowed the husband could leave. It was based on a passport number. Basically, based on a passport number, you could leave the house for a limited time on certain days of the week, depending upon what your passport ended in. And so they, this husband and wife couple couldn't even leave the house on the same day together, and otherwise they were completely had homebound and, masks were insane there, even up until very recently. So it was disappointing, certainly with the way that they handled that. And obviously then they've had a lot of protests there recently where they shut down the Pan American Highway and other things, demanding, price fixing, which they got.
And any of these countries, anywhere, I mean, the chimpanzees will elect somebody who tells them convenient lies, and then he does what he wants to solve a real or imagined problem. And the population tends to just roll over and do what they're told. So this planet is a dangerous place if you're a free thinker or just a rational individual. Nothing against Central America, not really worse than any other place. Yeah, it's pretty discouraging. Testimony to the human condition.
Right. So Doug, next question is about silver. This viewer says that the current costs of production for silver are between $22 and $24. So the question is, since it's like $18 now or something like that, where do you think it's going to go? I mean, people feel like silver's been one of those things suppressed, like they feel gold is suppressed.
Yeah,
thoughts?
I know. Well, I wish the government would suppress something important like wheat or corn. Well, they never thought about that, I suppose. Or oil. That'd be good to suppress that too. But it turns out that they suppress gold, which they actually don't give a damn about and don't believe in. Anyway, silver. Look, to start with, very little silver is mined as a primary product. I'm just guessing. 10% of the world's silver is mined in silver mines. Almost all of it is a byproduct of copper mining or gold mining, and then to a lesser degree, lead mining and zinc mining, because it occurs with all those things. But it's a byproduct. So the amount of silver that's produced is not really, doesn't matter what the production cost of some, goofy little narrow vein silver mine in Mexico is. It's a byproduct of copper and gold mining primarily. So forget about production costs for silver. It's different than production costs for gold or copper, which.
It's interesting. Okay. So do you have any thoughts on the direction of silver at this point? I mean, obviously people feel like it and gold, have been, should be moving higher. And I know you said at one point that you were more bullish on silver than gold, and gold now, I think it dropped below even $1,700 an ounce recently.
Yeah, I think it's back up to $1,725 as we speak. Look, trying to guess who's going to be buying and who's going to be selling these things, it's very tough. But the lower they go, the more I like them. So that's all I can say.
Makes sense. And also, I mean, a big reason why they've gone lower is because the dollar has been so incredibly strong. Like it's just been crushing the currencies.
Only strong relative to other currencies. Relative to real goods, it's still losing value at 10 to 15% per year, notwithstanding the fact that cyclically commodity prices have fallen, but they're still printing up dollars by the trillions. So, you can't listen to today's news to determine what's going to happen tomorrow morning or next week with these commodity prices. But yeah, I think now's a very good time to buy Canadian silver maple leafs or U.S., what do we call them in the U.S.? The
American Eagles.
American Eagles, right. Great time to buy them. And great time to buy small gold coins. Well, I happen to, I'm talking my book, but, I do what I tell people to do. Those are Canadian quarter-ounce maple leafs. There's more, but, now's a good time to buy them. I don't know where the bottom is. But,
it's interesting though, comparing the two, like the commodity price for gold and silver compared to uranium, where the setup for uranium is so much more extreme, where there's so much more obvious lack of supply to meet the demand, that is clearly exists today and is likely to grow. And so I think what a lot of people they're expecting, they expect gold to function in a certain way because we see the destruction of fiat currencies happening all around us. It isn't the same sort of commodity setup, the explosive rise you get when you get a situation like what you have with uranium, right? Am I thinking about that right?
Yeah. And uranium, we could find ourselves in the same position as natural gas right now. Lots of it exists, but you can't get your hands on it quick enough and it's always being burned. Yeah, absolutely. And it's the same situation with oil and coal too. So, I couldn't believe these videos, which I presume are real, were in Poland, which is like, coal country, where there's lines of people miles long in their cars looking to buy coal in Poland.
To load up the trunk with coal.
How does that happen? You've got to ask yourself. Poland was all about for forever. So how does this happen?
Shocking.
It's all about laws and regulations and taxes that make things uneconomic. It's, people don't realize that the real enemy in the world is the state. It's the state and the people that are drawn to the state and want to work for it and with it. That's your enemy out there.
I think Biden's trying to make sure that more people do realize that, though. So I guess we can thank him for that, at least.
Yeah, but in a time like today, where, as Matthias Desmet says in his book, time of mass formation, mass psychological hysteria, which is conquering the whole world. It's like the Salem witch trials, but on a global scale. At a time like that, and it's getting worse. It's still building momentum.
Okay, next question, Doug. Asking, they say, you must have reliable sources of information or opinions regarding world economic and political events. What are a few of the sources that you use that they might follow as well?
Well, look, I don't even read the mass press anymore. Well, I read the mass press to know what other people are reading. I'm reading to see what other people are reading and to see what a lot of them are thinking is being factual. But I don't believe much of it. And it's hard to get good on the ground reporting from obscure places. Because there could be something really interesting going on right now in Bolivia, but nobody gives a damn. There could be something really interesting going on right now in Katanga province of the Congo. Well, who gives a damn? And who's going to report it? And if it's reported, people are going to say, hey, nobody even has heard of it. They don't know where it is and they don't care. So what are the chances I'm going to hear about it? I wish I had friends in every important province in the world and they just write me, a couple sentences every day about, or paragraphs or pages, depending on what's going on in all these places. That'd be a valuable thing. I wouldn't think it'd be that hard, actually, to put together a network like that in today's world, where you get people that are actually walking around on the streets and talking to people and can tell you, yeah, this is kind of what's going on. But I don't have a source like that. It'd be great. I'll bet if we organized something like that, I think there'd be a market for it. I'd subscribe for sure.
Yeah, I think I did a test within our Telegram group at one point where I was trying to ask a question like, what are the specific local COVID enforcement rules where you are? Like, have to wear a mask, restaurants open. And we got a lot of people from all over the world. I think we had something like 45 45 or 50 countries that were represented in that sample, and lots of different cities within that, hundreds of responses it gave us at real-time information about what they were actually experiencing in their city. And it's very different than what you see, even if you were to go to the website of the country and look up what their policies were. So we did a little test like that, and I found it to be very effective. But it's amazing that people have started to substitute. So I'll tell you something. When I was flying into Uruguay, they no longer required health declaration forms, PCR tests, or proof of vaccination. Okay, so they weren't requiring those forms anymore. Okay, I told our little Telegram group here in Uruguay that, and one of the guys says, but I don't see it on the website. Like, where's it on the website? I don't believe it. And I said, I just did it. I'm here. I just did this. This is like, and I know from firsthand experience that this is a policy. And he said, I just don't believe it unless you can point me to the website where it says this. And it was like, people are so trained to find the truth in their screen instead of in actual experience that I don't even know if firsthand accounts are that reliable anymore. I think people are just telling you what they heard or what they read instead of like going outside and going, is it raining or not?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, I'd expect that our listeners are more reality oriented than the average person out there. The thing is, it's interesting, but you and I don't have the time to correlate all the good information that we might get in. I mean, this is why people make a business out of this type of thing. Maybe we can do that. I don't know, find, some bright, right-thinking young bumblebee that would like to correlate all this, and then we can retail it to people for a reasonable price as being reasonably reliable. I mean, it's an opportunity. It takes organization to, how to do these things. I mean, that's not my forte.
Yeah, we've got to, and I think I'll maybe go back to that with, it made sense, especially with the COVID policies as they were rolling out. I wanted objective data on what people were seeing. And I also, at the same time, I had my assistant update a database for me about, as the restrictions changed officially on every nation state basis. And so we published that actually made it public. We published it for like 6 months. So I wanted to compare what people were saying versus what people were experiencing. And I found it interesting. But yeah, we should try something like that again. And I think that there are good sources of information out there. But I think what you find is that for some reason now, you have people who seem to talk about everything. You know what I mean? Like a talking head we talk about every topic on the show, for instance, but most talking heads, they delve off into areas where they're just sort of dabbling and reading the news like everyone else. And so, I like Peter Zeihan, for instance. I like him. I know he's become popular recently because of his new book. I think it's The End of the World is Just the Beginning, but he wrote a few before that. And I think he's he sounds very credible. He has a grasp of lots of facts. But then at the same time, I think he's got some clear biases in his thinking. Like, you just can't imagine that anything works out well for Russia, for instance. He just can't imagine that. And he can't imagine that, really that the U.S. doesn't come through the difficulties that we're facing quite well. I think it's just kind of biased in that way. But so I think you have to listen to people, and then you have to make your own judgment about it still trust but verify. Even there's no guru for information.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. And frankly, if I know somebody is a socialist or a fascist, well, I tend not to trust or believe their interpretation of anything, because their whole worldview is askew from mine. Maybe I'm the one that's wrong. I don't know, but I know what my values are and your values. It's personal freedom. I mean, that comes number one. It's not the preservation of the state or something like that.
A lot of people do think from that assumption as sort of step one. They do.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, this is worth exploring, and maybe some of our listeners or one of our listeners is in a position that they'd like to organize a business. I don't know of any business that's doing what we're talking about right now, with getting information from all over the world, including really obscure places, and answering a list of questions weekly or daily or whatever to see what the spirit of the century or the spirit of the week, if not the century, is in different places.
Right. No, I think that'd be really good. So if it's somebody with a tech background who knows how to build an application, because we definitely would need this have to be powered by tech, that where we could seems like fairly simple though. We're just sending out a request. So we have a network. We're sending out a request for information. Maybe have a small bounty associated with completing that. With providing that information. maybe not, I don't know, but it shouldn't be that hard to do, and then essentially collate all the data and come to some conclusions around it. So
that's right. There should be a bounty involved in it. It's like in my last novel, Assassin, we had the Paladin Network,
right.
which was in many ways an information gathering operation. And word to listeners, read that book. You're going to enjoy that book. And if you look at the sections on the Paladin Network, it might give you some ideas of how this thing we're talking about now might be directed and oriented.
Exactly. Okay. Doug, do you think we're approaching, or maybe we've already arrived at, the start of a mass genocide? If so, if this is planned or just bad management?
Well, the question is to what degree do we believe the things that we hear? Like, we hear that insurance companies are seeing a 20% increase in all-cause deaths. That's what I hear, but I haven't heard that reported by Metropolitan or John Hancock or one of those people yet. So I don't know. Seems possible. And you hear all kinds of anecdotal evidence, and you see all kinds of anecdotal evidence, but it's like it's so politically incorrect for anybody to try to correlate these things, and God forbid related to vaccines, as opposed to what do they call it? Like unknown causes of death.
Oh, it's sudden adult death syndrome.
Yeah. Why would people just start dying all of a sudden that you call, gee, I don't know why he died. We've got all this advanced medical technology, and there are such things as autopsies, but there's thousands of people dying of SADS. Oh, as long as we can give it a name, don't worry about it. This is all very strange. And I really do believe that these horrible people that are at the World Economic Forum would like to see most of the useless eaters, as Yuval Noah, what the hell his name was, Harari, says, would just disappear. And the ones that are left would basically be serfs for the benefit of the elite. I actually think these people think that way.
Well, because they say it, Doug. I mean, you don't have to like put things together. I mean, they literally publish, they get them on videos saying these things. So it's not
yeah. And after Biden's speech last night, where, he didn't use the word deplorables, but it was actually worse than deplorables. Yeah, they're feeling so bold and so powerful, and they are so powerful that they come out and say these things. And it's actually an effective form of psychological warfare to beat down the plebs.
Right, which is the primary form of warfare or whatever that we're enduring. I mean, I think it have been for the last couple of years. I mean, if there is a war happening, it is primarily a psychological war. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Yeah, I mean, Napoleon said, in warfare, the psychological is to the physical as 3 is to 1. And he was right.
Okay. Doug, have you come across a book list that could serve as a quality general education instead of going to university? And if not, would you consider creating one?
Yeah, we should do that, Matt. I mean, look, for years, I've been toying with this idea of writing a book on how to educate yourself. I'd call it The Renaissance Man. It'd be more than just reading stuff. It'd be doing stuff. But, I haven't done it. You haven't done it. I mean, it'd be intellectually gratifying to do that, and it would do good, and you want to do good for the world. But we all got our priorities. So,
well, and that, as we've talked about it, that would be much more focused on doing than reading. I mean, and I think that's, if there's one core problem with the educational complex today, is that it's basically all based around abstract ideas and a lot less actually engagement with the real world, which basically then leaves people with the inability to function in the actual world.
Yep, I completely agree with you. I mean, just sitting in a classroom, which is what happens in universities and high schools and grade schools, listening to somebody of questionable knowledge and intentions yap at you, I don't think that's a very good education, quite frankly. Ancient Greece, when Aristotle and they would walk and talk and question with the people, small numbers, who were lucky enough to be their students and explore ideas. That's not what goes on in classrooms today.
Right. Instead, it's like you're getting bits of disconnected information, data points that you're supposed to somehow remember and relate to something. But it's all, like talking with my son a couple of years ago, as we were pulling him, started to homeschool him, he would talk about the stuff that he was covering in his, American studies or history classes. They were factets, as I guess you would call them, little pieces of information, totally disconnected from any context and, clearly presented with a slant, trying to, and a slant, there's a bias, but also just to make sure you can check the box on the standardized testing and say, yeah, he knows who the first president of the United States is, and it was, and once we started doing homeschool, and we did some of Tom Woods has a homeschool curriculum. There's Ron Paul's got a good one, and I think they actually contributed to it. But the thing is that the history that's taught there is just, it's much deeper and richer and connected in a way that you can actually remember. And of course, history is the kind of totally really abstract contextual knowledge that maybe helps you make better decisions, makes you help you better interpret what's happening around you, but it still is in that category of ideas and not in the category of actually interacting with the world around you, shaping events, learning skills from whether it be building a house or I don't know, welding some sheet metal. I mean, either way, like those actual skills that come from actually doing things, trying to solve actual problems around you, I think is where the best learning happens.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't know what we can do about it at this point, quite frankly.
Yeah, maybe the best thing to do would be to find some, you think about making it as a book, but maybe just begin by collecting places and collecting ideas in some public way. So you can see here's things that one could do to acquire skills. Like we talked before, I can't remember the name of the program now, about where you could go and you learn how to build a house. And it's like, you're there for, I think 4 weeks, and you go and you learn from beginning to end how to build the house. It's built by the time you leave. Like, that's amazing. What an amazing experience for a young person to have. That'd be amazing.
Yeah. And like years ago, there was a British stockbroker who, for whatever reasons, wanted to find out if he could take 25,000 pounds, which is to say, I don't know, 30,000 bucks, whatever they were at the time, and see if he could take that $30,000 and trade his way around the world. And he had fantastic experiences. He tried all kinds of crazy things, like, buying camels in one place in Algeria and selling them someplace else. And finally, out of all these things which were marginal or disastrous, he found that he could buy wine in Argentina and ship it to Japan and double his money. He just happened to work that out. But he went to like 20 countries. I think that's part of an education.
Definitely kind of deep engagement with the real world. You learn a lot.
Yeah, there's lots of things that could be done like that. And we could put together a program standing on the shoulders of other people that have done things like that. But this is a major task. Just putting together a list of books to read, major task. Intellectually interesting, but why?
Exactly. At some point, yes. Yeah. What's in it for you? And I know you're not that kind of person, but that does matter. Like, there's time is a scarce resource, especially now.
Well, maybe one or more of our watchers, for whatever reasons, would like to pursue this and present us with a plan of action that might make it quick, easy, and fun. Oh, incidentally, QUIK, easy, EZ, and fun, PHUN. And yeah, I like things that are quick, easy, and fun.
Yeah. So again, if you have ideas on this, on Telegram, best way is to reach out to me there. If you have a plan, especially if you know how to write and communicate well, maybe you could be the driver of that project, and we could just support it with information, ideas, book structure, and then ultimately, with making sure it's a success in the market as best as we can. So let us know.
World's full of opportunities. And I think we've talked about several so far.
We have. This is turning into not being so much of a doom cast, Doug, but kind of an opportunity cast if you're paying attention.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's see. Let's do a few more questions here. So reverse, somebody asks, as they say, Uno reverse card, what would Doug like to talk about? What topics are occupying your mind? Maybe before we got on the phone today, Doug, what were you thinking about? What was on your mind?
Well, look, what's always on my mind is cabbages and kings. I mean, I think about almost everything. I tend to be at least mildly or tangentially interested in almost everything, but you can't pursue everything. So answer to the question, not sure. Everything and anything. Next question.
Right. Doug, do you have a dummies guide to commodity exposure for new or smaller investors?
No, I don't know of such a guide. And newer and smaller investors should not trade commodities on the futures market.
Definitely not.
It is something for people that are well capitalized and have lots of experience, because what's going to happen, it's not the commodities themselves necessarily fluctuate so much, but the leverage that's available, and you will wind up taking advantage of it one way or another. It can be very, very dangerous. So little inexperienced people should not do that. That is for later. Commodities, what does that mean? Buy gold coins, buy silver coins, way in your own possession.
I have a suggestion that's not, it didn't originate with me, and it's not that novel. It's I think I first heard about this from Chris Webber at some point in the past, who's an excellent newsletter writer. He was talking about a commodity index tracking fund. It's an Invesco commodity index tracking fund, which I owned for a while. It ran up a lot. I sold some, but it's the ticker is DBC. And I believe it gives you exposure to just a whole basket of commodities. So if you felt like, as I did, especially 9 months ago, that we were entering just a commodity bull market, then it just gave me very low risk exposure to a broad basket of them. So I didn't have to be right about cotton, necessarily, or, right about natural gas, but to give you exposure to everything. And I think, pretty sure when I sold my position, I was up like 60% in less than 6 months. So that was a good way to get exposure.
That's a good point. And as we speak now, I think right now, is a good time to get into something like that. I mean, a lot of commodities are at least cyclically much lower than they were 6 months ago.
Yep. Okay. Doug, what's your take on the whole Epstein affair?
I'd like to know, who his pals were, who was riding on the plane, what they were doing there on the plane and on that island. I'd like to see the videotapes. I'd like people to know about these things, to talk about it, because it would unmask the corruption and the degraded behavior of the people that rule the world. So that's what I'd like, and that's what I think. Chances of that coming out, very slim. Anybody that tries to bring that out is probably signing his own death warrant.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if I think for a lot of people, actually, the whole Epstein affair was probably a big wake up call to how corrupt the systems were. That this guy was arrested for it, commits suicide in jail, and then of course, then Ghislaine gets convicted, but none of the customers, none of the client list is ever released. There's never any information about it. And the way it was all just so massively suppressed, it was like, I mean, it's if you think we live in a society where law and order is applied universally and it's a fair system, then I think this probably scared you straight. I hope.
It's laughable. Of course it's not. Of course it's not. I mean, if you're the ruler or high up on the pecking order, I mean, there's all kinds of pressure you can put on little people below you to leave you alone. I mean, and few people are that brave that they want to take their property or their lives in their hands to run counter to that. I mean, accidents happen to people that are. No, this is getting very serious. It's always been a problem, but now it's getting more serious than ever.
Well, I think you used the word brazen earlier. It's just, it's like, no, we're just going to have to say he killed himself in the jail cell. That's what we're going to say. And all the cases were not working at the time. That's the story we're going to go with it. And we're just going to plow forward.
Yeah. And listen, we have to admit that it might have been hard in a jail cell to do the things that he did. And
with a paper sheet. Because
he was dying slowly. I mean, I'm sure the next person is going to be shot in the back of the head, and that'll be a suicide too.
Double tap, a double say. He did it twice to make sure.
Yeah, you just never know. It's funny. I'm reading this. Well, actually, I'm watching the series called Terminal List.
Yeah.
Read one of the books, and it's true. The special operations guys, of which there are many, run out of Fort Bragg, plus the people that are in the Praetorian agencies. Like the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, the CIA. I mean, they basically have carte blanche to kill anybody they want, and it'll all be covered up.
No doubt about that. Okay, last question for you, Doug, and this is semi-related. This person says, I'm 22 years old, and I'm thinking about joining the military. Does Doug think it would be beneficial for one's self-development, or should I focus on my trading/investing career?
Look, all I can tell you, and you're going to have your own experiences and views on this, Matt, for sure. But I guess it was good fortune. It was to go to a 4-year boarding military school back in the days when they were fairly rigorous places. Why did I wind up doing it? Well, I thought I wanted to go to West Point. I'm so glad I went to a military boarding school because I realized, no, I really don't want to go to West Point. Although when you're young, yeah, you can take orders and do as you're told. And, because you're just a kid, you're used to being told what to do and so forth. But the older you get, the less prone you are to take orders from people that you may not like or even respect. So look, there was a time in my life when if I hadn't gone to that boarding school, I might have gone to West Point, which would have been an incredibly stupid move. Nothing like being a second lieutenant shipped off to Vietnam. Jesus, what a nightmare. Or for that matter, I mean, I toyed with things as crazy as I was signed up. Even then, I was signed up for the Marine PLC program and toyed with the idea of joining the French Foreign Legion, which that would have been a fucking nightmare. Assuming you survive your 5-year hitch. Glad I didn't do that. Well, you're always glad with things after you've done them. In retrospect, yeah. Listen, there's almost nothing that I've done that wasn't immoral. I wasn't glad I did it afterwards. Would it have been worth it? Probably not. So that's my answer to the question. What do you think, Matt? I mean, 2-year hitch could be a good experience at a certain stage in your life. I don't gainsay that.
I think I would have. I think I had a different view on it even 5 years ago than I do today. I was against obviously all of the foreign misadventures that the U.S. has been involved with, and I know a lot of guys who spent a lot of time in the sand in Afghanistan, Iraq, and that was all extremely bad for them. For the most part, it was not a good situation for them. They were deployed for so long in those places. Unlike at least in Vietnam, people would go and do a tour, 6 months, you're back. I mean, it was not like that, for the guys who went to Iraq and Afghanistan. A lot of times, a lot of people even when they were supposed to, they reached the end of service, they held them over because they needed more people for the firing line, so they kept them on. So, but even then, I still say there was a lot of good that could come out of joining the military. I thought, like, especially if you're a young man you have that real hunger for challenge. And it needs to be, and the challenge like, working on reading books to learn things is not the challenge most young men need. They need to do something physical in the world where they're actually testing themselves. And I think there's the young men's drive to do that is what's sort of fueled, the armies, as long as they've existed. But in the army can satisfy that. The military can satisfy that for you. And I think it did that for me. And it was good in that way. There's no wars happening when I was involved at all. And at the time I remember being disappointed about it. I wanted to go to fight. I wanted to put my skills to the test. I wanted to try. I wanted to use the training I had. I wanted to. And now I thank God that it never did happen, because I know I would have done stuff that I would have regretted. I know I would have called in some artillery fire, on a village, and some innocent people would have died. I know I would have done that. I would call in some close air. I called in mostly artillery, but close air support as well is my job. It's kind of it's like a scout who calls in artillery. Indirect fire support is what they call it. So I definitely would have killed people, and I would have felt bad about it later. Innocent people would have felt bad about it. So I'm glad it didn't happen. The experience for me was very good, though. It helped me give me a sense of what I assumed certain physical limits on myself. And it wasn't until, going through my I guess it was my basic training, and more even so my advanced training, where I realized that my assumptions about what I was physically capable of were completely were way too low. Like I didn't even realize the well that was there if you're willing to dig down for it enough. So I found that to be very effective. Person today, though, going into a pretty demoralized military in the US, I think is pretty frightening, honestly. Where first of all, the vax mandates, the culture war that's taking place, within the military, the great people being drummed out of it. I just think it's not the same place. I think it's culturally toxic rather than maybe culturally empowering. And so I would discourage anybody from doing it at this point. Might change in the future, but for now, it's not even the physical risk of having to go to war, which is very high right now, I think, but it's the culture.
Yeah, I think that's a very realistic and accurate assessment, quite frankly. And the people that are running the military today I mean, all these general officers are just political operatives, and the people right at the top are, I mean, they're horrible. And the fact that they're dressing up that bizarre tranny in an admiral's costume, stuff like that going on. I mean, this is, you know, and yeah, exactly. And they actually have military guys wearing dresses and high-heeled shoes. I think that really happened someplace, didn't it?
Yep.
And this is just degraded. It turns it all into a laughing stock. I'm sure the guys at Fort Bragg have very mixed feelings about that, but a lot of them are just turning into trained killers. So this is kind of bizarre what's going on in the military.
Sorry, I froze there. You said a lot of the people at Fort Bragg are what?
Are being transformed into trained killers, that their units almost have a life unto themselves at this point.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I think, you know, one of the great things about the military is that actually, I think they can teach you to be a good leader by first teaching you how to be a good follower. And a good follower actually is good. Well, okay, now, you know, obviously obedience is one thing, but like some of the people, some of the leaders I had in the military were inspiring, who were more capable, you know, more dedicated, more whatever than you were. And then so it helped you, and you wanted to follow them, you know, because they were so good. And I'm even like and I don't know how much of this is myth and how much is reality, but what is Mattis, you know, was the Marine Corps general that had this, you know, was perceived by members of the Marine Corps to be like, you know, a Marines general, you know what I mean? The guy who basically is not going to just sit there as a staff general, you know, far from the field and ordering, you know, people to do stuff they wouldn't do, but he's like out there and really prizes the troops, you know? Like I learned, for instance, they're like the officers in the Army, like, you know, the soldiers, the lowest level soldier eats before the officers do. Every low ranking soldier eats. And if there's not enough food, then the officers don't eat. And that's like something that's so obviously basically true about actual leadership in the world. But I had no exposure to that before I was in the military. So there's a lot of good that can come from it. But when the culture is toxic, I doubt it is.
Yep. I agree. Love to hear something from guys that were just recently in the military with their experiences to tell us what they found.
Yeah, exactly. If you are currently a member of the military or recently got out, we'd love to hear. So contact us on Telegram. Let us know how things are going, or if nothing else, just respond in the comments of this video, because we're definitely very, very interested, and honestly might have a lot more questions for you about what's actually happening. So yeah. Okay. Well, I think we'll leave it there for today, Doug. Thanks a lot. It was an interesting talk. And I think lots of opportunity today we talked about. So it's good.
Lots of opportunity. And I can't wait to see what develops over the next week. And hopefully we'll do this before next Friday again, as a follow-up to Uncle Joe Biden's perfectly scary and horrible speech.
I imagine there'll be more follow-up on that. That'll be needed. Okay. All right. Thanks, Doug. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Matt. You too.